Bruins lose 3-2 in Game 7 to the Carolina Hurricanes. Tough loss, but I'm here with my good friend Michael Hurley for the post-game show. Hurley, every time I have you on for something, it's always like the end of the season or kind of a post-mortem type thing. And this is immediate. This is right after. 3-2 the final. Tough loss. Heartbreaking ending, by the way. Like, I think that was almost worse than if they just lost 3-1 and it was like, oh, the offense didn't show up. The offense actually showed up big, just too little too late. Final minute offense, which is, I think, the most heartbreaking for fans.
Yeah, and to have the puck on Bergeron's stick with 7 seconds left with a chance to tie it for another ridiculous Game 7 comeback would have been poetic, but unfortunately for the Bruins, it wasn't happening. But I mean, I think to me, the biggest missed opportunity was, 9.5 minutes left. Smith and Coyle on the 2-on-1, and just Coyle didn't receive the pass. And that, those plays add up. So when it comes down to the end, yeah, it's close, but you kind of got to do your business before that.
Well, so that was the thing, is for 59 minutes of this game, where the hell was the urgency? Like, I think that's what people are most hung up on. And they kind of mentioned this in the intermission report. And, obviously we all kind of saw it. Like, they didn't play it like a Game 7 for the first two periods. I mean, the urgency increased a tiny bit in the third, but even then it wasn't what it nearly should have been for a full game. You knew going in, winning in Carolina was not your thing. You had to bring it. And I didn't think they looked terrible in the first. I thought they did enough to keep it scoreless. And then Carolina scores with 1:24 left. And then they take the 4-minute penalty. And it's like, all right, now the wheels are falling off. And I mean, you just look at the bottom the bottom six, and again, you mentioned like the missed opportunities offensively, right? Coyle. But, you had Taylor Hall in the first period on that, cross crease 2-on-1. Ranta makes the save, but still, it's like, you got to bury that.
Mm-hmm.
And then even at the end, Pasternak, there was a play in that final, might have been, you know what I'm talking about, final
it was
minute.
like a diagonal pass, and it bounced over his stick, but
bounced over his stick. And it's like, if those go in, and I think that's what people are going to have the toughest time swallowing, is just those missed chances.
Well, not just
and
that.
It's adding up.
Because you talk about the urgency. I mean, Carolina is a much better team than the Bruins, but
Yes.
you made it to Game 7, which is, you got yourself a chance to win this series, like kind of steal the series. And okay, things hadn't necessarily been going the way you wanted to, but you get that gift of a power play in the third period and don't get a single shot on net. That is not the Bruins that we've come to know, not the Bruins that we would expect. And really, I mean, that's a team that, I don't know. I mean, you can't say they got what they deserved, I think is the way to put it, because if you can't take advantage of those opportunities, you weren't getting many power plays on this day. To finally get one in that moment and not even get a shot was brutal. So it's hard to say that they deserved any better than losing that game.
And again, it comes down to what their issue was in the series, which was they could not play in Carolina. And I think one of the worst parts of this series from the Bruins' perspective, like as you said, Hurricanes were the better team going in. I mean, they were favored. A lot of people picked them. I picked them at the beginning of the series, but they had a backup goalie in net.
I picked them in 4.
Did you really? You picked the Hurricanes in 4?
In my head, I don't make predictions.
In your
but
head,
in my head,
okay.
Maybe 5. But
you should have just said you picked Hurricanes in 7 in your head, and I couldn't not believe
right.
you.
I knew it would come to that. But yeah, the goalie factor should have, or could have, played a bigger role than. I mean, it did play a big role, but it allowed you to get to this point in Game 7. I don't think Swayman played poorly tonight at all, but it was sort of a non-story. The save you made on that you mentioned, the save you made on Hall was
that I
the big
made.
One. Yeah, great save by you, Evan.
Great save.
Dexterity there. I didn't know you had that in you, but no, that save was the one. I mean, if that goes in, the whole shape of the game changes. So credit to Ranta on that one, but it should have been a bigger deal, and they couldn't capitalize.
Yeah, I mean, I think it stings, I think, for them that, they just didn't generate more offense against a backup goalie. Again, Ranta is not bad, but he's also not that good. And again, if this was Freddie Anderson, it's different, right? If it's Freddie Anderson, you get stoned by a guy who got snubbed for Vezina voting, then sure, right? You live with that. But I think the fact that you couldn't generate offense, Craig Smith held off the score sheet. Charlie Coyle had a pretty quiet 7 games. Eric Holla, had that 1 goal. I know Coyle had a power play goal as well, but they had quiet series. David Pasternak was quiet at times. Taylor Hall, like the fact that you couldn't, the secondary scoring that sustained them for most of the season, especially when they were like one of the top teams in hockey in the second half of the year, it was all the secondary scoring. And you think, okay, you're going up against Carolina, up against a backup goalie. This is when that could kind of shine. It never did. And it didn't even shine except for game 6, really. The secondary scoring never came through that much to make a real difference in the series.
Yeah, and that's, you mentioned when they were one of the better teams in hockey for the second half of the year. That stretch when they were what, 18-3-1 or whatever.
They were
That's what
insane.
that's what it was. You were getting goals from all four lines. You were getting contributions, and then once that dried up, they hit that cold spell, and they were whatever 1-4-1, and it was they were at the point when they were surging. We were talking about the 2 seed in the Atlantic, and then within 10 days, we were talking about perhaps the second wild card. So I think
Yes.
it's a good picture of how much the secondary scoring impacts the team overall, because it, I don't know. You watch the game today, and the reason I say I picked Carolina, the reason they're like, are we sure Trent Frederick is an NHL player? Like, are
It's
we sure?
valid.
And he's on the third line, like let alone a third line winger. I know Bruce Cassidy doesn't really feel that he's an NHL player based on the fact that he was a healthy scratch for most of the series. So it's just not the type of lineup that I think is built to go deep in a playoff series. Maybe you can have that hot stretch in the regular season, but I mean, to me, for a long time, the writing's been on the wall that this team was at best what they were last year, which is win a series and lose in the second pretty convincingly. So they didn't get that far, but I think it feels like if you look at the 21-22 Bruins, they have fulfilled their destiny, or they fulfilled what they should have done, which is, I think it's speaking more to the roster construction than it is the players underperforming or anything like that.
Yeah, I get that. I think there were definitely some shortcomings in the roster construction. I also think, you mentioned fulfill the destiny. I mean, my take was always if they could beat the Hurricanes, the path opens up, right? I would have a good hunch for the Bruins if they were to play the Penguins or the Rangers in the next round, and then you never know what happens in the conference final. Tampa, Toronto beat the hell out of each other. They're playing Game 7 right now. You have Florida as well. Not easy, but you're at least in the conference final potentially. I know I'm looking way far ahead. But I think that's where it stings the most going forward, where it's like you would have had Pittsburgh or New York. Not to say they were definite wins, but I'd actually like the Bruins' chances way better against them than I would against the Hurricanes, and that makes sense. Again, the Hurricanes were a higher seed, but I do, as much as it's roster construction, I do still look at some of the lineup and I say, Taylor Hall has to produce more. Craig Smith in areas, Charlie Coyle, like, and you mentioned even Frederick, like. Obviously, Trent Frederick, we were not expecting to score a bunch. He did. I mean, the one play that summed up this whole game was when he hit the post, and then they
Yeah,
went down the other way and just immediately scored. And that
yeah.
was when you kind of knew that it was like, all right, well, writing's on the wall for this one.
Credit to
This
him.
one is not going well.
Nice shot. But no, but I mean, the second goal, I don't know whose responsibility it was to cover the right point, but nobody did. It was the Coyle line was out there. The puck wheels around to the point, and when you give an a skilled NHL team that much time and space to operate, bad things are going to happen. So I lean toward assuming it was Frederick's fault. We'll see on the further breakdown, but things like that where it's just quick little mistakes, split second decisions, they lead to terrible things. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, do we talk about Nick Foligno when we talk about dedicating $3 million to a player? I mean, I don't know
Well,
what he
that's a
brought
whole.
to the Bruins this year, other than a 25-minute ceremony for his 1,000th game before one of the games this year. That was moving. But other than
And his
that, I
love
mean,
for candy corn. People forget back at the beginning
that
of the
was a
year.
long time ago. Yeah, that
That was a
was
very long time ago.
old school. But yeah, I mean, I look up and down the roster, and I don't feel as confident as you that they would play well against New York or Pittsburgh, unless the Rangers got through and Shesterkin turned back into what he was to start that series. But I don't like them against, really, the only playoff team I would like them against is Washington, and then they ended up being a pretty tough playoff team too. So I don't
Yeah.
I don't see it that way.
Well, yeah, I know. I totally get that. And again, it hints at the part that, like, and this is stuff I think we're going to get to later in the offseason where we're kind of dissecting every part of this going, that fourth line didn't make a lot of sense, or, Frederick on the third line. Because again, there was a stretch there in the regular season when Frederick, Coyle, and Smith was their best line, which is wild. And, one thing I was very shocked at with Bruce Cassidy in game 7 was he never reunited the top line. And you would have thought in a do or die game 7 where you need a goal, why was Pastrnak not put back up with Marchand and Bergeron? I know Pastrnak did not have the best game tonight, but still, like, what? I didn't understand why that line was not put back together when you quite literally needed at least one goal. And none of those lines 2 through 4 were getting you close to a goal going to the third. I thought for sure when they opened the third, I'd see that top line up there.
It's a great point too, because it's, I mean, there's game flow and there's reading the feel of the game. And if Eric Howla was generating chances and was all over the puck and was, dominating puck possession, then I could see maybe sticking with that line to keep them alive. But that was not the case. You needed to pull the ripcord on the desperation of reuniting that line. So I think that's a fair second guess. I think a lot of people were second guessing it in the moment, saying like, all right, the clock is ticking. And the fact that he had done it already this series makes it even more baffling to not do it when the season's on the line.
Yeah, I didn't understand that either because he had, and I was surprised even. I understood, switching the lines up for Game 6 or whatnot, but to not have them back together for Game 7 when you don't have the line matchups that you want, why wouldn't you just try to overpower them? And I didn't quite understand that. I know he's trying to do the depth thing, and you have to cover different ways of the lineup. It's not, you can't just shut one line down and shut the whole team down, but that's kind of what ended up happening. And again, I mean, obviously the first line did score. They scored a goal. It was Jake DeBrusk. But I
It
just
was
feel
an
like
accident, but
it pretty much was.
still
That's another
counts.
whole. That's another. There's a lot of off-season storylines. I don't want to use them all up in a post-game show because Hurley, as you know, they got an off-season full of stuff to talk about. So I don't want to. I don't want to, get it all out of the way now. But what they end up doing with DeBrusk is going to be very interesting because he was solid through. I mean, not the greatest playoff series, but he did produce at times, and he was good in the second half. Like the trade request is still in, as far as we know. So that's going to be a whole thing to watch. There's obviously a much bigger storyline with Patrice Bergeron. What's your take on that?
Well, my
Bergeron.
take is that Jake DeBrusk as a Masterton nominee is one of the most comical things I've ever heard in my life.
That was wild.
I'm not sure what led to that. What turmoil he endured by requesting a trade and having it denied and then playing decently. But
Yeah.
no, there's a lot. I mean, it all depends on Bergeron, because to me, if Bergeron goes, you've got, it's not your normal offseason patchwork, fix this, fix that. It's philosophical. It's big picture. It's, do you start thinking about your stars in Marchand and Pasternak, trading them off and restarting? I don't like. There's a lot to consider there, because the way that we've from the outside have all looked at this run is like, for as long as that core is there, you do what you can to win a Stanley Cup. As long as that core,
True.
and to me, all that's left of the core is Bergeron. Marchand, yes, but once Bergeron, if he does decide to retire, there is no core. You have two very good players and then a bunch of other guys. So to me, I think that's what is at stake with Bergeron. If he says, I want to come back for one more year at $5 million, then you're in business. You can rework this. You can be another. You can be a playoff team again. You have enough talent. You can fix some of the mistakes you made last year. But if he decides to retire, I don't know. I don't think you're looking at a playoff team. I think you're looking at a team that has to reevaluate itself and make some big decisions. So, and will Don Sweeney be making those decisions? That's another large storyline. Again, we're doing the off-season storylines in the post game. That's my bad.
Yeah, no, I that's totally fine by me. I think it's a little bit different. I think if Bergeron goes, the core is sort of there. Marchand, Pasternak, Taylor Hall, Charlie McAvoy, Swayman in net. Hampus Lindholm. You know what isn't there though, Hurley? A center. There's
Yeah, you
no
kind of need.
centers. Need someone down the middle, and that's I think what is going to be a huge thing this offseason if he does go. Um, I think that's going to be a huge thing. I don't think you need to blow it up, but I do think you need to invest in a Philip Forsberg, or you need to do something drastic, whether it be a trade or something that gets you a number one or at least a legitimate top six center. You cannot go into next season with Eric Halla and Charlie Coyle as your 1 and 2C. That is not going to cut it in the NHL as we saw this year, even with Eric Halla as the 2C.
You said something interesting there in building your core, as you listed Jeremy Swayman over the goalie that signed a 4-year, $20 million deal last year. So I think that's another interesting aspect is, I mean, that one, I don't know about you, but day one in free agency, when I thought they had a pretty good young goalie, to go out and sign that guy to a not only that deal, but with no move for the first 2 years, was a pretty significant decision. So I don't know what they do in net either. If you're going right down the middle, go all the way back to the crease while you're at it.
No, it's true. But I do think that you look at this season, Omar was valuable. I mean, Olmark
Yes.
stepped in when Swayman was not hot. Olmark, I mean, they were on and off hot. I mean, whether or not Olmark's worth the actual money is sort
Yeah,
of a
couldn't
whole
you
nother
get that
thing.
from, like you could get that from a Halak for $1.5 million every
I don't
year,
know
you
if to
know?
that level you could. And there also weren't a lot of other good veteran goalies who you could have signed like a Yaroslav Halak last offseason.
No, I never liked that deal, so
Well, no, that you can hate the deal. I just think Olmark did have value this year. I think that is sort of one of the things where, like, if you don't have Olmark, Swayman's not used to playing a full season. Swayman had some really rough parts of this season.
Mhm.
I think Olmark was kind of always the stopgap. You know, you even look at games 1 and 2. Olmark kind of was like the first guy through the wall. You know, like in Moneyball, first guy through the wall always gets hurt, or whatever the quote is. Like that was kind of Olmark this series. But I thought, I mean, again, going back to Swayman, I think Swayman's your. I think, I think if there's anything that's been proven from this season, I think you have a young starter in him. Like I don't
Yeah.
think that that's a crazy thing to think. I think you have a number one in him. I think they're going to stick with the goalies they have for next season. I don't think anything's going to change with that. But I do think that Swayman, you have something like that is a positive. I think even in this series, like was he the star of the show in Game 7? Absolutely not. But you you got he wasn't bad. He was fine. So it's promising. At least you got something in net, which I don't think is too bad.
It helps too that we mentioned Masterton nominee Jake DeBrusk earlier, overcoming the adversity of playing for a team you didn't want to play for. At least in net, you have two goalies that like each other and
This is
seem to
true.
root for each other, which in professional sports is really weird. I'm sure you saw Ryan Tannehill 2 weeks ago be like,
Ooh, that,
"My
that was
job's not to
terrific.
mentor," and it's like that's absolutely true, and it's like controversial, but it's like this is a cutthroat business. So to have that sort of harmony it does allow them to sort of say, look, we're gonna do the same thing next year. And they might both be for it. I don't know. If I'm Swayman, I'm lighting my hair on fire, being like, you didn't trust me enough to go into the year with me as a number one. You decided to send me down when you knew Tuca was gonna come back. You started the other guy and then went to me in the playoffs. It's just like I would Jake DeBrusk myself if I were him, but I think he's a little bit more mild mannered and temperate than I might be.
I don't think he's gonna be doing any of that. It was also his first full year starting in net. It's like it's hard to trust that fully. But anyways, that is in net that we saw. Were there any other things that stuck out to you from Game 7 that long term implications or anything like that? Any big thoughts that we didn't get to?
No, I mean, I think
Anything
it
with
went
Grizzlick?
the decor is a problem. I mean, the decor is it's you have two guys at the top now, and then you have other guys. I don't know. We all wrote the myth of Derek Forbort after he had 9 blocked shots, and I think that tells the story of the Bruins decor. It's like this guy blocked shots. Yes. On other teams, they produce goals, they get pucks toward net, they play 200 feet. It's missing, and Grizzlick didn't develop the way that they hoped or wanted, which I think is more on them than him. I think he is maybe because they saw Torrey Krug become Torrey Krug, like someone else could do that, when clearly that's not the case. So I don't know. It's the hardest thing to do, I think, in the league is to build a solid decor 1 to 6. They've certainly had some swings and misses in recent years. I don't know that that's one that you can turn over year to year. That is a system thing. It's not like you can just go out and get 3 great D-men and be solid there. So I don't know how they fix that year to year.
I think Brandon Carlo is your biggest issue back there in terms of money you have locked up, in terms of expectations, being the next shutdown defender, and that just hasn't been there. It wasn't against Carolina. It wasn't this season. It wasn't last season. Like that's a thing you gotta figure out. You got to get to the bottom of that. I remember back in January when Cassidy said they got to start playing like pricks more. It was kind of directed at him. Like
Yeah.
you got to play
Yeah.
angry, dude. Like you got to be mad. And there were a lot of times this year where that just wasn't the case. The bad turnovers. And again, he's not a puck moving defense. We know that. Um, but to have the money invested in him that they do and the expectations, I think that is a thing this offseason that is an issue. Like that's not a good thing. So there are a lot of questions with this team. And even if they went to the second round, I mean, again, as I said, I think they get past Pittsburgh or New York. I still think even if they went to the conference final this year and lost, you're facing the same questions. These are all the same questions that you're facing. It's not like easing the burden of those things unless any of those guys go sicko mode in the next round or whatnot. So, you
But
like that
on the
sicko
plus
mode
side,
reference?
What's that from?
Oh, it's Travis Scott. So,
Okay, yeah, I've heard it. I don't know. He had a Happy Meal named after him once.
this is true. It
So,
wasn't. It was a meal at McDonald's. It wasn't just a Happy Meal. It was a meal.
but then yeah. Anyways, um, um,
People
at the
watching are like, what the hell?
on the plus side, losing in the first round I think helps expedite a lot of decisions. If you make it to the conference finals, there's a lot of we'll just bring it back and make this tweak and that little minor change. At least this way, you know that you are the bottom of the playoff class. Like, yes, you forced a game 7, but I mean, you look at aggregate goals against the team that you played against this year, you weren't on their level. So I think from the management standpoint, there has to be that sort of reckoning that they're not good enough. And losing in the first round does help drive that point home, I think.
You're correct. Before we go, do you think there needs to be any changes to the coaching staff? Do you think there needs to be any changes to the front office?
I would change. I mean, I would change the front office before the coaching staff. I don't think
I would
Bruce
agree.
Cassidy. Whatever, we could nitpick certain things and we could say that this wasn't good. And maybe we saw with Claude Julien, coaches run their course. So if that's the case, then fine. I don't think it is, but maybe I'm not going to say it is or isn't. I just think Don Sweeney has run this team constantly just shelling out picks and bad contracts and just desperately trying to keep the team at this certain level. And eventually that catches up to you. They need someone to come in that builds with a lot more long-term thinking, a lot more caution, not David Backus contracts, things like that, not contracts that just sink you. I would even put like Allmark and Foligno this year are 2 players you could have absolutely done without, and that money could have gone elsewhere. And if not, like, there's so many decisions that I think Don is not adept at making, and eventually it caught up to you. I mean, they had so much talent for so long. They had an excellent goalie for so long. They had all these pieces, and slowly the pieces have been going away. Chara, Krejci, and now if Bergeron's going to forget it, you need someone else to run the team. Yes, Tuukka Rask, very good at his job. So I think as those pieces start going off, you need someone else to come in and build the team a different way, and that's where I would go with it. I mean, if the coach goes, the coach goes, but I don't point to Bruce Cassidy. I like I said, the talent on the team was the talent. They are what they are.
Yeah, I don't look at this as a Cassidy issue. I was saying the same things about Sweeney last offseason. I don't feel it as deeply after just this season. I think if you want to go the full body of work, you absolutely have a case that they should move on. I think it comes down to drafting better.
Go last year to the day one of free agency. You have Haula, Forbort, and Ullmark. Like
Ullmark, I see the value in. Haula ended up working out.
Day one. Those aren't day one guys. That's not free agency opens and you just throw the bank at those guys. And the year before, don't forget, it was Kevin Miller on day one of free agency. So
this is true. That was last season. Yes, I see. I understand where you're coming from on that. I do think though, and that was this past season was late day one. That was not like right at the start of free agency. It was later in the day. It felt like at least
still day one.
There also weren't a lot of if memory serves, and I could be missing someone. There weren't a lot of other second line centers to go out and grab. And at the time, Krejci had not yet announced his retirement. Not retirement, his move to Czech. Oh yeah, you got the bugs coming in. He had not yet announced that he was.
That's true. That happened after.
So you couldn't exactly just fully move on unless Krejci had told them behind the scenes. And at least from their moves, it seemed like they had a hunch he'd be going. But Haula ended up working out for at least the regular season. Ullmark worked out fairly well for the regular season. Like Foligno's the one, and even you could make an argument with Forbort that it's like, and Mike Riley.
Yeah.
And again, I'm on your side with this in terms of like, I think there's definitely a argument for him to go. I don't know if you can do it solely off this season. I think you need to go bigger picture. They also just need to get better at drafting, which they have had better drafts the past 2 years, but drafts got to be better. You got to develop your own guys. They haven't been able to. That's why they're going out and getting these, overpriced guys or depth pieces. You look at the Lightning, they got depth guys all over the lineup that they didn't have to, go out and sign. They developed. Same with a lot of these teams. So that's the season. Hurley, that's it. Season's over. Bruins lose 3-2, Game 7. Hurley, what would you like to plug for the people? What can the people look out for you from in the offseason? Maybe other work, Celtics, Patriots, Red Sox, all those things.
Yeah, you know what? The Celtics are still alive for at least one more day. So we've got
one more day, potential, maybe more.
At which point it will officially become Patriots season because the Red Sox smell. So,
Terrible.
there'll be plenty of coverage left and right. You can just
Nothing worse than when you're watching the Bruins get beaten and they got, Elliot from Jordan's coming on going, "Hey, if you buy all this furniture, you get it free if they sweep the World Series." It's like, "Oh,
yeah,
that's terrific. 12-20 Red Sox, book it. Give me a sofa, bed, everything. I'm getting it
I'm
for
gonna go buy a
free."
couch right now.
Yeah, I got it. But anyways, Michael Hurley, Evan Marinofsky, thank you to everyone for following along all season. There will be content all off season long. And that's it. End of the season. Bruins lose 3-2.